folks, and welcome to The Farm, a podcast dedicated to culture, parapolitics, and high weirdness in all its many forms. This is your host, Recluse, aka Steven Snider, the longtime curator of the Visa blog and author of The Art, The Secret History of Psy-War, Conspiratainment, and the Shattering of Reality, Book 1. All right, today's guest is a repeater on the farm. Hailing from the high country of Southern Appalachia, he is a sculptor, self-taught software engineer, and published author with a keen interest in the occult and parapolitics. His published works include Blueprints of Mind Control, Quantum Rapture, Best Apocalypse Ever, and The Ark of Baphomet. Folks, I give you guys the great James True. James, thank you so much for dropping by again, sir.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Good to hear your voice.
Absolutely. So this is going to be a bit of a free-ranging conversation. James is going to tell us a bit about his most recent projects, and then we're going to explore some of the pressing geopolitical issues of 2024. And there are no shortage of subjects on that end. We might even weigh in on Clown Show 2024, and James may even give us a preview of his Astronosis 2024 presentation as well. So on that note, let us start the show. So James, your most recent book is Blackeyed Club, which I believe is your second novel. So before we get into that proper, why don't you go over why you decided to publish something as a work of fiction?
Yeah, thanks. Blackeyed Club just came out a few months ago, and it's been several years of work that have been presented in various formats to the public in more of a presentation format about here's how the eyes work, for example, or here's how the thalamus is controlled. Here's how the brain develops a system of poker chips so that the body can convolute an economy out of it. And Blackeyed Club is just the ability to explain how we actually work, but placed in a real life setting, which blends all of the really current events that are facing us now, from genetic cloning to secret societies to looking into and seeing worlds, or demons, as you might call them, or as they're referred to in the book, that others are not able to see, and that the idea of a serum being invented that elicits your membership into this Blackeyed Club is basically the theme of this book. And I think being at the cusp of Aquarius, where we are now, the novel's perfectly timed to explain really what's happening now with just the changes, the gauntlet of what we'll call the Corona Gauntlet, the Grand Crown, that stepping through that has led to a new world, whether we like it or not. And that this world has a much different substructure as the old world before it. And this is a world of energy. It's the world of the Ethernet. It's the world of the internet economy. It's the world of spiritual plasma that's been tangilized, almost turned into a currency, so much more than it ever has been before. And I think that part of what's going to happen with that is that our ability to render and hallucinate the reality of this inner world through the use of chemo signaling or smell technology, pheromones, is basically the next frontier, and that this serum allows you to see into that frontier that scientifically we absolutely know is there and does in fact dictate, I'd say, all of human behavior.
Was the title partly a reference to the phenomenon of black-eyed kids? I gotta inevitably ask that one.
No, but the archetype alignment is very interesting. I didn't realize how much albinism is tied into to this concept too. And albinism led me to Africa and the history of Tanzania, the genetic history of Botswana, and the the telling fortune of Swahili as a way to backwards engineer where consciousness was, because Swahili was being invented as this sort of hybrid scripted language that allowed the regions of Africa to talk. And that noticing how the English, the British invention of Swahili, we'll just call it, was still changed colloquially, gave us an opportunity to really understand Africa as a consciousness. And I think that we don't understand that place. And most of why we don't understand that place is because we are not seeing this world, this chemo signaling world of smells, of pheromones. And this is the animal world. It's a world that we've purposely left a long time ago, and we've utilized the tools of ignorance to build a barrier which stops us from seeing certain things. And when we stop to see these certain things, we're able to trust each other and relax and digest. We're able to enter into a parasympathetic state because we can lie to each other equally about how we're not living in the same community with a mass murderer, for example, or with someone that would murder our family to simply just grab our crops. And so the idea of lying and covering up who we truly are turned out to be a function of civilization that allowed us to kind of band together. And this banding together we've forgotten about. It's become so petrified. And this novel, by going into Africa, it allows you to kind of see the true nature, I think, of who we are. And more importantly, this serum does that too. And so you're watching all the different groups that control the world that want the serum, but also they don't want the serum because there's so much profit from the ignorance that we have. So it's sort of like a broad blanket of what I think actually reality is, just kind of blended into a novel that's easy to snort up the brain, and read.
Was this supposed to be a part of a series as well, if I recall?
It's actually the prequel to Quantum Rapture, which is another sci-fi book, my first novel, a sci-fi novel. And that talks more about how an ancient supercomputer, it would be quite necessary for us to invent a supercomputer that would last the next deluge. And that if we could install this organic supercomputer in the mountains somehow, that this technology would eventually appear to be invisible and even spiritual to the next reset. And so that novel is setting up how and why this happens. And this Blackeyed Club turned out to just work out to be a really nice prequel, because in order to understand the true nature of our reality, we really have to come back to smell. The olfactory bypasses most of the neocortex's ability to pass judgment on things. And so your body experiences the smells of the world unfiltered. And so it becomes the only true serum that actually exists. And as we approach this state, we'll call it a singularity or perfection or ubermentia or whatever you want to call it, is like our divine rising. Eventually, I think we will be able to dip our toes deeper into this world of Hades, this hidden world of smell, and see the truer nature of who we are. And at that point, all of our geopolitics stop. Most of the world as we know it, it's not that we don't go on and doing our own very different things. It's just that the entire structure of what we think reality is would fundamentally and dramatically change at that point. And we would be painting a new world. And I propose that it would be vastly different. And that's a book that I haven't written yet, but it's the idea of what Lemuria would actually look like, what would be required for it to look like if we were living in a world of chemo signaling awareness, is what we could call it. By the way, when I say chemo signal, it's the same word as pheromone. It's just sort of a more modern term for the same thing.
Well, this is a bit out of right field, but oh gosh, your comment on smell had actually brought to mind one of the common features of several cryptid sightings. And I am just sort of bringing this up because I have been fascinated with this type of phenomenon in the context of, maybe like Jacques Vallée or something like that, in the sense that paranormal phenomena is possibly a response, a kind of triggering event when you've maybe started to step outside of your bounds or something. It's part of the sort of control system that Jacques Vallée had hypothesized that whatever, for whatever reason, was left behind by some other intelligence on this planet or possibly throughout the universe. I mean, who really knows? But anyway, getting back to my point here, theoretically, cryptid sightings would be a part of this controlled
Hmm.
system. And quite often, one of the defining characteristics of them are very sharp odors that come from these creatures. I'm thinking specifically of Bigfoot. In
Hmm.
fact, my buddy Josh Cushins actually wrote I believe, a book on that whole subject as well, the perfumes or something to that effect. But it's a really interesting thing, and it's sort of bizarre how that seems to be very common with a lot of cryptid sightings, is people notice very unusual odors, which are usually attributed to them. But if this is kind of tying into something like a control system, is that possibly a sign that you're maybe stepping outside of conventional reality, if you will?
Yeah, it's that's not out of right field at all. It's directly, it hits right at the bullseye of what I'm pointing to here. And that what we do is we tend to create a costume for the energy that we sense in the world, and we purposely hallucinate a reality that best it's not the reality that best dictates what's true. It's actually the reality that gives us the most utility. So the reality that allows us to function the most effectively is really the reality that we are all rendering. And so underneath that, you would see a subterranean reality, which is the actual reality of things. And any time that you are interacting with energy, so if you think about what it's like to interact with a UFO or with Bigfoot, you're doing two things. I mean, you're doing the same thing with these two different things. You are stepping into a pool that you've actually been ignoring for 200,000 years. You are stepping into a frequency. I'm just using that 200,000 years loosely, but if you think about your epigenetic plant that is you, has never been able to step into this electro or ultraviolet kind of smell before, which means that for centuries, for eons even, it has ignored every single thing that exists in that realm. And it's had to explain why certain things happen and why, but it can't go into that world. So we end up describing a reality that only meets the parameters of the road of what we're calling our utilitarian reality. So when you step into the UFO experience, what I think you're doing is the smells are already there. It's not even that all of a sudden there's a smell that just came in this one location but has never been there before. It's more about you have stepped into a vibration that you can perceive now for the first time, and you begin to hallucinate. And so you put a costume on the hallucination, and that costume is either going to help you hold your toe in that water or make it easier for you to escape that water and admit that that water doesn't even exist. And we admit it. That's how good we are. We admit that Bigfoot doesn't exist, which makes him invisible. And I don't mind saying that because I don't need Bigfoot to exactly be what people describe Bigfoot as. When I hear people describe Bigfoot, I hear someone stepping, sticking their nose in that smell and doing their best to interpret what they think it could be, but would still give them utility. Not what would be reality, but would allow them to sense it. So when you think about a UFO, you've got a reptilian space pope. He's got no clothes on. He has no fingernails. He can't scratch you. He has no teeth. His genitals are non-existent, so he can't rape you. He doesn't have the musculature. He's like a thin photosynthetic butler. He's really short. He's got big, big kitten eyes. He doesn't have any hair at all because there's nothing wild about him. He's completely tame. He's completely calm and sedated. And that in order for you to hallucinate all of those things about this creature, it would allow you to interact with a chemo signal that you've never been comfortable interacting with before because you put it in this costume. And so all your demons, all your UFOs, all your meth, psychotropic experiences, or social meth hallucinations, all of your schizophrenic episodes, all of your shamanic visions, I think would all fit into this black eye club, this serum, this ability to no longer melanate, i.e., hide the world from you. Because what happens is when you smell the truth of Bigfoot, your body, if you're not comfortable with this, your body starts to secrete it. Let me start over. If you sense energy that you are not comfortable with, your body secretes melanin around all of your sensory receptors inside your ears, in your eyes, in your skin, all of the ion holes, all of the channels, the ports that you intake data are saturated with melanin, and melanin absorbs the electrical information, the presence of that creature, and it ignores that. It suppresses it. It absorbs it because it does not want you to faint. It does not want you to enter shock. You have a mammalian system which is limbically hardwired into your environment. And because you are limbically hardwired into your environment, you are going to need some sort of governor to prevent fright shock, like sudden deer in headlights kind of activity where you just simply can't respond because you're overwhelmed. And so you have the amygdala that has this function that is constantly sensing how freaked out you are and secretes the correct amount of melanin to all the different parts. This isn't just the amygdala. I'm just kind of using it as an example. But if you think of her, Amy, the amygdala, as a sort of Virgin Mary type figure, she is shielding the world from you. And she's doing that by sensing how much of the world you can absorb and painting that reality to best match that. And so this is really at the heart of who we are. And when we understand this science, it becomes quite easy for me to write a sci-fi novel about this serum, this Black Eye Club serum that would give you the ability to see, because you could bypass your, it's not that you're bypassing your amygdala, it's that you're convincing your amygdala that you are not nearly as freaked out as it thinks you are. And so that's really what you're doing. And I think that most of your schizophrenia, really, most of your albinic schizophrenia, a certain kind of albinism, almost always comes along with schizophrenia. And I think this is like my closest proof, although there's many different examples I can give to illustrate why I think it works this way. But this is the biggie for me, is that this albinism seems to have this same kind of effect. And when you lose the ability to melanate or absorb this information, your eyes start to strip into strabismus. They start to flutter and shudder back and forth. They start to try and blur reality by making it shifty, by making it less solid. It becomes less intense for you. And so we're watching the natural feedback of a body that doesn't have the ability to secrete melanin do its best to absorb that. And it happens to be that the schizophrenics also happen to see more of these type of creatures, more of these type of entities, because they do not have the throttle or the ability to turn the lights off. They have no eyelids, so to speak. And so really that's what the serum does. But more about it's really just it's here to illustrate to you how our consciousness actually works, because our consciousness is a piece of equipment. It's not just a free open state. Everyone experiences full consciousness. That's not going to fly here. So we have a dial, an aperture that we can turn up or down, and that's purely based on how comfortable we are with our hallucination.
Now, it's interesting too. If I'm not mistaken, haven't schizophrenics have been reported to mention phantom odors fairly regularly as well?
Yeah, yeah. Most of the most of your extrasensory things are going to almost always have, and a lot of times people will describe this smell as an electrical feeling. They're like, when you feel the tingling on the back of your neck, and it's because someone has come into the room. I think that that's actually chemo signals. That the back of your neck, the pores in your neck, that's a port, right? All the pores in your body are inputs, they're eyes, and that they are looking at a chemo signal that was not there before. And you feel the sense of that witness because you feel the sense of, if you picture what the body looks like, it's a living, breathing reef of smell, of pheromones that are constantly coming in and out of the pores of your skin and your armpits and your crotch and all the greasiness of your hair. And that all of that is an ebbing essence of smell, which really is at the heart of who we are. This is why we saturate our underarms with aluminum. This is why we wear pants that are tight. We're trying to eliminate our smell because it provides us with camouflage. And so all of the fashion that we have, all of the deodorant and antiperspirant things that we have, all the diets that we have too, mostly those are meant to dial in some sort of pheromonic presentation, whether that be muting certain characteristics or enhancing others that aren't there. It's all the same kind of thing, because ultimately, deep down, the way to directly interact with someone is to talk to their reptile. And that reptile would be purely olfactory, in the sense of, this would be the one system where your neocortex doesn't even have the ability to give input, because it's at least a half a second behind the reptile, because the reptile is smelling it instantly. The thalamus is instantly reacting to that. You're hoping that after a half a second, something called will that's inside your frontal lobe is start to, secrete some kind of plasma bubble that's going to try and overpower that. But we are inklings right now with our ability to do this. We're growing, we're becoming Xaviers overnight. Definitely, it's happening fast, but I don't want us to get rid of this reptile. I think what will happen in the future is that we will notice that it's more beneficial than it is scary, and that civilization is not actually the pinnacle of who we are, but ourselves are. And this would bring us back to the smell, which would bring us back to the concept of Aquarius, which is the seeing invisible energy. Aquarius is an air sign. It's like, well, why is a water bearer an air sign? It's like, because the water's invisible, because the energy is invisible. You're seeing the current, you're seeing the flow, right? Radio waves, all these things are precursors, because we are on this world where we are perceiving outside of the electromagnetic spectrum that our ancestors have. And it looks like Bigfoot. It looks like UFOs. It looks like wandering chariots flying in the sky, And historically, I can show you all these examples of UFO experiences that change costumes over time. And the reason why they change costumes over time is because I think we're perceiving the same energy, but we're simply learning to shed our ability to ignore it. And ultimately, that's really what reality is. By the way, all this is the mythology of Hades, which is something I discovered quite after the fact, that when you look at what Hades is, it's all about this. It's all about a hidden world, the unseen. The richest part of the world is Hades, and it's the part of the world that's unseen. So I think that we've known this anyway. The Oracle mythology has always been telling us the truth about this. We're just slowly realizing it because we're becoming more comfortable with our hallucinations, so we can pull in more smells from the world that we've been ignoring on our radar before.
Well, let's get into some current events here. So there are no shortage of wars raging at present, so we might as well start there. We're a little over 2 years into the Ukrainian-Russian war, so what is your read on this conflict?
Doesn't seem like a war. It feels more of like a MacGuffin. But I think that most wars have been that way for probably since World War One. And it's more of just a way of moving furniture around and restructuring things. And so a lot of pressure ends up happening, and Nord Stream pipelines and all kinds of big things that you think could have been easily covert or not covert. And the reason why those are not covert is because the purpose of propaganda is to paint a story for us, to make it easier for us to accept a commission over what's happening. So to me, EU is just been the EU fell a long time ago, and you're just watching people move furniture around. I don't mean to dictate that I know all of this and that I know what's happening. It's just that I don't think that politics can function on a truthful level, simply because it requires so much mass conscious sort of egregoric belief. It's more about urges. And so to move geopolitics, it's more about just placing urges on the chessboard, and nothing's actually being done. It's more about just writing a commission, like the Warren Commission or the 9/11 Commission. It's a story, right? We paint a painting of what the story is. And so in order to move Ukraine, it's such an armpit of consciousness for so long. I realize this sounds horrible to say, but I'm just saying if you look at what's happening or what's been happening on the ground in Ukraine, it's the kind of place where an old reject TV actor could easily step into the role of president and the entire thing be orchestrated in a very low level way, but no one on the ground would actually notice, A, B, care, or C, even really change what it is they're doing. It's a psychic war that's happening there. And I think it's the hardest issues that they have with controlling the EU are going to be the people of Ukraine. That mindset is a hard nut to crack. And that in order to crack it, you're going to have to paint an outer story. And, oh, well, they're renovating the mall. That's what's happening. And it's like, no, they're not. Radio Shack is defunct. Okay. No one even knows what radio is. And then you got the word shack. They're not renovating. All right. They're gutting this fish and they're changing it into something else. And this is what it looks like, but we don't like to talk about that. So, we say it this instead. When we look at why we've entered all the conflicts that we've entered, when we look at the facade of reality terrorism, where we're implying that the government and the media are somehow separate entities, and that this is why we haven't caught bin Laden, or this is why the Ukrainians are able to somehow hold out this rebel forces, against what was supposed to be the largest superpower that could have completely destroyed America overnight if we didn't raise our kids right. It's just showing me that it's so much theater that it becomes almost impossible to really even talk about it in an accurate way, except as kind of like a living mythology that's existing right now in our mindset.
Of late, the war in Eastern Europe has been overshadowed by the conflict now unfolding in Palestine. So, what are your thoughts on this current war?
Yeah, I think Palestine's going to be, it has always been, and will continue to be a very important tool, and that tool is sort of needing to be modernized as a piece. When you're playing chess, you're going to stick your queen way out above your ranks of pawns and make it look like she's in danger. And simply by creating a vortex of energy around that spot, you're going to be able to do a lot more things. What I'm about to say, I think, is a pretty broad speculation. I don't mind you labeling me as that. Even though I majored in political science, I've long since decided, since Blueprints of Mind Control, what politics at that level really is. And so I look at it from a very different perspective. However, I do think that historically there's been certain things that we've historically changed the story about our most religious and holy tales in order to move places that used to not be the same onto the same place. And so if you smell what the rock is cooking, you have a holy rock that used to never be that holy rock. At no point was that rock ever really considered holy. In fact, the true holy rock is said to be south of the holy rock that now has a Islam mosque on it, and that we've purposely changed our stories to suggest that no, it's actually the same, and that these two pinnacle powers of theism both need this precious place to be their navel, their center of the world. And so Palestine is a crucial part of this story. It's some of the worst. Israel is known, if nothing else, Israel is known for their ability to use subtle peer pressure to influence 28 states to create a law that makes it illegal to boycott them, and that took subtle politics for decades. Subtle politics. And they've nothing but shown you over and over their ability to play subtly. If you look at what happened with Egypt, of course, I'm talking about the USS Liberty, where what was supposed to be a subtle plan was actually one of the few times it was exposed, and that a naval warship was attacked by Israel under the auspice that Egypt was doing it, hoping to push us into a conflict, and that has always been the undercover nature of Mossad. Mossad's motto itself is, through deception, there is war. So I think we need to apply this to Palestine, and I don't think any of us are. I think most of us assume that the Israeli state, which is not a Jewish state, it's an Israeli state, that the Israeli state is participating in an avenue that most of us have frankly blocked out, that we think doesn't even exist. And that avenue is that countries are not exactly what we think they are. And so to me, what I see planning out is we need a world court. The people who want the world court, the only way they're going to be able to get the world court is if they are the ones themselves that are actually prosecuted by the world court. And that if the world court prosecutes the very people that were trying to bring on the world court, everyone else who was against the world court would suddenly be, hey, this world court, maybe it's a good idea. And and that this is how you do anything and everything since the King of France, since the earliest times of the Hundred Years' War, or since the early triumphants of Rome, we've been implementing politics like this, where we set up a certain fall, a certain MacGuffin, a certain nuclear code, or a certain nuclear key, or a certain puppet dictator, and that this becomes the sanctity or the sacred part of the plot that saves us. And I think that Palestine is that. It is that plot. And it's very necessary and important as we go forward if you want to understand the geopolitical world as I think I do. Keep in mind that I believe in the CIA. And when I understand what the CIA does, the first thing I would have to admit is that there's no fucking clue that I would have to what is exactly going on in the field at every level. And that most of us don't have the calories, including me, to look at that 24/7 and say that's how the world is. So we don't. We wait for a narrative. We wait for a commission that's been painted to tell us what's happening. And then we try and build a construct from that. So it's harder for people maybe to sit next to me on where I'm at with Palestine, because I just think it's a much more like decade-esque kind of thing that's spread out more, because you're looking at someone who's a Magnus Carlsen at chess, not a fifth grader who just got their chess set from Walmart, So we're not going to know these things. But we can see the shadow of their movement, because the intent, the smell, is always going to leave a signature that's in the room. And one of those signatures is always going to be attention. What the world's focusing on is always going to show you where the cowboys are moving the herd. And most of the time that works backwards, right? So they champion something when actually they want to denigrate it, and they denigrate something when they actually want to champion it. And it's very clever, because it doesn't require that much, because the egregore is such a simple-minded thing. It has such a short attention span. So in order to implement the really just furniture changes, you're going to have these storylines, and they're going to last, like Trump coming back. Oh, he's crushed by the re-election, but now he's back, but they're already trying to keep him away with indictments. And there's a secret court and a secret laptop, and all that is the only keys that you could jingle that would give this system legitimacy. And so we're watching that legitimacy have no choice but to kind of play itself out. And it's going to have to become more dramatic, more potent, more life-threatening. And all the ops that they have to do to sell that story are just going to become more effective, more technical, more modernized, and the same budget, overall overarching budget that's just so much larger than any of us could face against it. We'd be forced with the same kind of things there. This is the exact thing that happened in New York, like before the Civil War. It's like 6 years before the Civil War happens, and for some reason, there's dudes that are like, "Hey, do you want to join the Northern Army?" And they're like, "Oh, sure. You get a free coat, okay." It's like, you have no clue on the ground, because 6 years ahead in the future is not a future that you can even fathom. You can't even smell that far, right? And so I think that's what's happening now, and Palestine is a perfect example of this MacGuffin that's placed to prove that, I think.
Well, how would that tie in with the decision that was made last year by the International Criminal Court to go after Putin and Russia for the Ukrainian conflict? Because it seems to me that would be setting a precedent that would really unnerve a lot of nations outside of the Western Hemisphere, if you will, not the literal Western Hemisphere, but the
Yeah.
hemisphere of influence, especially if it goes into, say, confiscating assets or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like putting helium in a football. And everyone now thinks that the entire game of football is now changed because they've introduced helium, and what do we do? And so now while you're doing that, everything else is happening. So the idea of Russia being just as liable as Israel, I think kind of proves my point even more, that you're looking at a world court that just wants to form. All it wants to do is just coagulate. It's been here the whole time. They just need to commission it onto the stage as, well, this becomes necessary. So you need a global emergency to get people thinking in a global mindset. So you have the pandemic that happens. You have this system that is released, and I'll purposely skip over this for now, but oh my gosh, we could go so much into the CIA and COVID. But what you look at a pandemic that has to have a global element. The World Health Organization ends up coming onto the stage as a character. And the character doesn't need to be liked by everyone or hated by everyone. He needs to be recognized by everyone. Because the good wrestler is not going to be the person that makes everyone in the ring like them. Then you're not going to have a match. What you want is someone who has the ability to polarize. So really what you're looking at is polarization. So Putin's job is to polarize. Trump's job is to polarize. Netanyahu's job is to polarize. In all of these different regions that are acting like countries, they're really just polarizationally cultural buttons that can be pushed. They're mythology that's installed in a bureaucratic way that allows you to introduce a keyword or a concept or a MacGuffin or a prop that starts to generate the idea that this is happening. North Korea, perfect example. The entire story of the truth of what Ho Chi Minh was even saying versus what we were saying that he was saying. And this was back in a time where we weren't smart enough to check papers, like to go to a foreign land and buy a newspaper there and bring it back to the United States and then look at both. That was hard. That was hard. And more importantly, spreading that was impossible. You could not even convince anyone else that that's happening. Right now, things are different. They're not freeing totally, because honestly, there's only 2 chip manufacturers in the entire world, which should be a huge red flag. So the cuffs have already been placed around the noose. I mean, the noose has already been placed around the neck of a creature that hasn't even risen out of the sea yet. That's how far ahead these guys are. So when I see Putin, I see Netanyahu, right? Because the ICC is the Netanyahu is under the same radar. People don't know this right now. They want to put Israel in the court for their treatment of Palestine. And to me, what I see is, okay, court. Just like World Health Organization, WHO, Article 1, Section 9, Article 1, Section 9. There's the entire time before we even got here, it turned out that inside the Constitution, this entire time has been an article that literally says the writ of habeas corpus is suspended under the auspice of public safety, which means that all of the libertarians, all the people that have been insisting that we have a Bill of Rights, none of those rights have ever had any teeth simply because of this Article 1, Section 9. Now, the irony of that being 19 is not lost on me, but I know a lot of people don't like to look at the symbolism of that. But to me, the symbolism of that is even more of a show that this is actually what's happening, because it would be impossible for them to not indulge in the ability to create the archetypes, to play with the archetypes that symbolize what it is that they're actually doing, places them in more alignment. You do this with your children, by the way. We do this with our children too. We bend their archetypes into the idea of how do we go and get them to go to bed? Well, you don't say, let's go to bed. You start to introduce the idea they're tired. And you know that they're not going to be tired. You know that they're going to fight that, which is why you introduce it not 3 seconds before they go to bed. You introduce it 58 minutes before they go to bed. Now you're going to drain them. You're just going to drain their rebel resources. They don't have the resources like you of the empire. You're going to drain them and they're going to go to bed. And I think when we understand if you think about what it takes for any kind of story to reach you, that's propaganda. And propaganda, it's not a bad word, but propaganda does mean propagate. And in order to propagate, someone's going to have to pay a lot of money or have a lot of desire to want to propagate something. It's going to require a lot of volume or a lot of push. So when you start to look at all of this news from this way, it's really easier to look at what is the smell of this story? What is the underlying push of attention? Because it's the attention, I think, that seems to overwhelm where this is going. Personally, Stephen, I think it's Blue Beam. I think that Blue Beam is where this is going, and Palestine is a crucial part of making Blue Beam real. And I think that what we don't understand about Blue Beam is that it's not that everyone needs to believe in Blue Beam, because the truth of propaganda is that you will notice one day that you were surrounded by people that believe something that you don't, and there's not a fucking thing you can do about it, even if it's not the truth. And I think ultimately this has been the biggest lie that we've been telling ourselves, that we think that truth wins overall. And truth does not win overall. Propaganda wins overall. And it wins because someone was willing to put in more energy into building their fantasy, their commission than you were. And ultimately, this is what nature is. Nature's always had this same philosophy, right? That which thrives is that which pushes more into being itself. So even if it's kudzu, even if it's something that's growing, like a foot a day, and it's like completely tearing itself apart, nature's like, I'm fine with it because overall there's a balance here. So it's not really about truthfulness. It's about your ability to propagate. And so when we look at government as a natural ivy, as a natural kind of growth, I think it's easier to understand that countries aren't really what we think they are. And that the George of England and the George of America, both of them were named George. Both of them played the song Yankee Doodle Dandy. Both of them played the exact same melody, as we had the same war where we killed each other. And that would make a lot more sense if you want to look at history, that those two guys were in on it, that those two guys had a benefit for watching us fight. And to me, this is a closer truth as to what geopolitics really is. And it's more about crowd control, attention control, and improvement. And I think as long as you see all of those things, everyone accepts the smell of a government as long as it's delivering those things. Doesn't give a shit what the story is. Doesn't care if there needs to be two parties or if one needs to be a McCain, or none of that matters. If it smells on those levels, is there upward mobility? Does everyone have a reality that they can cling to? It doesn't need to be real, but does everyone have a hallucination that they can insist is the case? And that where most of us aren't just going to freak out and rip our clothes off in the middle of the street and just start going haywire. Yeah, we do that, but it's a very small percentage. And that I think ultimately that's really what dictates all of our news stories, is what is the percentage of freaked out people are. And it's funny because that's how the body works. Your amygdala does the same thing. Your amygdala is listening to the tremors and going, oh my God, there's this energy that I can clearly see. This is, well, see, I don't even think it's Bigfoot, but just to explain what I'm saying, the amygdala would see Bigfoot in its reality and would say, I'm not going to show this to this person because they're going to pee in their pants right now if they see Bigfoot. So we're just not going to smell that. And then they're going to say, I smell a skunk. And that's going to be a much easier reality to live because that's more comfortable. It's more profitable. It's more utilitarian. So you just take that and multiply it times, 250 million. And now you have United States. It's a living, breathing hallucination. That's what it is.
No, it's interesting. I know that there was a growing concern in some quarters of the intelligence circles, sort of getting into the 70s, and especially into the 80s, about the growing amount of mental illness that was happening in the United States and really more broadly speaking across the world as modern life became more unhinged, shall we say. But it's interesting because you see a lot of the same figures who were raising sort of public flags about this, people like Louis Jolly West, who were also extensively engaged in studying cults throughout this same time frame. So
Mhm. Yeah.
you really have to wonder at some point if the proliferation of cults that we started to see kind of, beginning around the same era, around the 1970s or so, was partly a response to try to come up with a place to filter a lot of the increasingly unhinged dregs of society into.
Yeah. And I think we actually purposely create incinerators, public guillotines that we set out on the street. And we literally say, hey, here's an ability to kill yourself and no longer participate in society anymore. And the government's job, part of their job, I'm not saying this is all their job, but part of their job is to come up with those guillotines.
Well,
How
this was
do
also the
we?
time when they started introducing heroin on a large scale to
Yeah, well,
society.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And we never get to talk about this, but I want us to imagine, because I don't mind us thinking it's all evil. That's fine. But I want us to also picture one thing. So the General Education Board, right, or Rockefeller, right, literally wrote down, look, we don't want any poets. We don't need we don't need philosophers, right? We just want farmers. It's fine. This America, we're fine with that. So you even have a tenant, a commission that comes out and says, our job is we want everyone to be indoctrinated with the same information. It's not that we even know what the propaganda is going to be. We just want to create the news wire that goes directly into people's minds. And keep in mind that the AP really created the Civil War. You have this underground information network reporting from the Spanish Civil War. So you start to notice the power of having information. Of course, Rockefeller himself made all his money from having information others didn't have. So it instantly becomes obvious to any government that it's actually information that's the most powerful thing. Way more than weaponry. It's the information that we have weaponry is the truth of the matter. And so if you start to hammer this out, you can certainly see easily that well, the CIA would basically want to create, let's maybe not just call it the CIA. I don't mean to just categorize it as that, but that our goal is to create a cult, and that cult is called America. And if we control that cult, we can use it as a resource. And this is a Mesoamerican idea. The idea of America being red and white striped, having a rust belt, is actually comes from the god of death, the Mesoamerican god of death. It literally raised his own children who gave their own hearts. This is the Purple Heart idea for their nation. Additionally, when you go to Templo Mayor in or where it used to be in Mexico City, there were two towers. One was a blue tower, one was a red tower. The blue tower was on the left, Stephen. The red tower was on the right. The one on the left worshiped the god of weather and the god of drought, basically the god of global warming. And the god on the right was the god of war, worshiped the gods of going out and killing other people. And so all the sacrifice people that were brought up to Templo Mayor were either given to Thalok, the god of global warming, or to the war god, to Huitzilopochtli, the Republicans. So before we even got here, there was a living temple, a nation of Amuraka that ran on the idea of a liberty figure named Koyo Shaukwi, who was murdered at the top of Templo Mayor. She had bells in her cheeks that caused her cheeks to bleed. And these bells, think about this as the Liberty Bell, that at the start of this festival, she was raised to the top and she was slaughtered, and her body was thrown from the top, and the Liberty Bell was basically cracked. Her body was landed on the bottom and was cracked, and no one ate it. No one took advantage of it. It was not a spoil. It was something had to be broken in order to launch the Huitzilopochtli Thalok ritual that would commence, where you've heard stories of like 80,000 people being sacrificed, and that each time they're brought up, it was a competition of, was this sacrifice for the god of war or was it for the god of global warming? And all these things hinged off Koyo Shaukwi being sacrificed first, liberty dying first. So every time we pass a law, we lose more liberty. And we have so many laws that you cannot look up how many laws we have. I guarantee you, one of you will try and you will realize why you cannot count, because the statutes are so inundated They've been added to and changed so many times that it becomes impossible to even count. Even the number of pages is a debate over how many laws we have. And none of us are aware of this because it's in the soil. This idea of eagle warrior is a Mesoamerican idea. It doesn't mean that we stole it from them. It means that if you're going to run a government over here, the soil is going to dictate what the archetypes are going to smell like and look like. And you're going to need a Thalak, and you're going to need a Huitzilopochtli. You're going to need a swamp. Think about it. Mexico City, built on a swamp. Washington, D.C., built on a swamp. Both of them competing because they left this other land to start a new land because they wanted freedom. And it turned out all they did was create this idea of sacrificing liberty under the auspice of freedom. And you end up with a culture that does not survive without war. So you have the flower wars. So your government is not going to make it unless you do the right things. Now, all this, I know it's huge run up. I'm sorry, but let's come back to the CIA. Let's say it's 1970s. And I want you to picture that the CIA realizes we can't just keep people down. We can't just make people stupid. The problem is that if we keep everyone too stupid, they'll just fall for the next cult. And that cult could come from China. It could come from Russia. It's too easy. We need our crop of humans to be resilient enough to value themselves with just the right amount of formula to where they're going to protect themselves. This is what any organic farmer would do, right? I want my crops to produce the best yield, but also to be, keep out the critters, to be self-sufficient. So to me, when I watch what the CIA is doing, it's a two-sided effort. First of all, there's no singular CIA, so it's impossible to, I think if anyone's having a discussion, I mean, it's okay to hypothetically talk about a structure, but it's wrong to think that the CIA has like one central function, right? So there's definitely going to be like one group that's like, America needs to be slaves. We will make them all slaves. I have no issue with you thinking that, but I'm trying to say that if you were smart and you were trying to create the right crop, you're not going to want them all stupid. You're going to want them to have a certain resiliency to them because your own personal job is at stake. Now, keep in mind that CIA, if you're going to be doing something to change consciousness, you're not going to need a CIA paycheck for that. So typically the CIA is sort of like a beyonder training camp where people who are ready to live above the government can find a free, easy way of doing that. So like in Arkansas, there's a famous, it's not famous because I can't think of the name right now, but an airport that made news because it was tied to the Clintons because it turned out to be a giant like cocaine trafficking like a hub. It was a terminal. And why was it a terminal? Because the CIA built it. And they built it because the CIA, you're a clandestine operation here to save the liberty of the country. The first thing you're going to want to do is we need money. And because you're here to save the country, you get to act like any law enforcer does. You're going to do whatever it takes to survive. So keep in mind that most of the CIA that we think is CIA is actually uber governmental agency. They're not actually relying on the government. The first thing they did is build their own autonomy. And what I think we're dealing with is multi-generational people that built their autonomy a long time ago, like back in the Civil War, and that they had a system back then and that they've been carving out the politics since then. And that's why I don't think countries are really quite what we think they are, simply because there would have to be too much collusion in between. And so you tend to buy politics. Forgive me if I said this last time, but I believe that you buy a politician just like you buy a horse or a race car. It has a title, and a human politician's title is typically just going to be like a blackmail kind of a situation, So like, if you wanted to if you owned Bill Clinton, one way that you could own Bill Clinton is if you had a photograph of Bill Clinton in a blue dress in a chair. If you had a photograph of him, and then you made a painting of that photograph because you wanted to sell the contract of Bill Clinton. And so if you bought the painting of Bill Clinton, you're actually buying the contract of Bill Clinton because you're buying the photographs to blackmail him, which gives you the ownership over that person. So all the politicians that you've typically have known have probably been someone like this, just like all the actresses and actors in Hollywood have typically been someone who's just been in some sort of situation where they're beholden to someone else because there's there's money to be made. There's power, there's influence in having that. Even a kingmaker, even if it's a fake king, the fake kingmaker is still going to profit from making kings. So it's all an economy that makes sense. And really, you end up noticing which facade worked the best. That's why Steve Bannon won the last presidency. Steve Bannon won that presidency from the ideas of QAnon, from the ideas of Breitbart, from the ideas of Pizzagate, that all those things, they were showing the vernacular of what it takes right now to insert a fantasy that's going to garnish the most attention, and that attention is who wins. So the priest who sits on top of the Templo Mayor really doesn't control anything. They just simply are the ceremonial person that says, oh, are you bringing this to Huitzilopochtli, or are you bringing this to Thalak? Is this a Democratic sacrifice, or is it a Republican one? It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that the sacrifices keep coming. And the only way you're going to do that is if you paint the best story. So your obsidian, your commission that you make is the story of the flower wars and whatever it takes to simply bring more bodies up to sacrifice because the machine needs them to survive.
Well, getting back to current events, what do you see happening with the China-Taiwan situation?
Um, so I think that because of the polarity of the Earth, I don't think you're going to like this answer, Stephen. Sorry. I think because of the polarity of the Earth, there are two dragons. It seems like the Himalayan flag, or I should say Tibet, but which even that flag is illegal to even look at. It's showing you these two different monsters, and one of them is probably this Amurakan monster, and the other's China. And these are two different dragons. Our dragon is the plumed serpent, uh, and this plumed serpent has its own ideals about life, but then China is its other. And so they're white as black, they're up as down. Everything is fundamentally different, which is why you're looking at a geopolitic that's more coming out of the realm of communism. We'll just use that as the realm itself. But still a long time ago, even with the Rockefellers, you saw a collusion happening, a very deep collusion happening between those two states. And so I think that those two states are just simply really have never had a better relationship with each other, and are simply managing what's required at the time to raise the best crop inside of their farm, and that farm is frankly, I think, requires a lot of on the ground living for us to even understand why the psychology is what is required there to do what it's doing. Why why was it so crucial for England to make sure that the heroin trade stayed open? Why was Hong Kong such a crucial piece of keeping everyone on drugs? Right? So it's like that shows you these underpinnings. I don't think I have an answer for you because I don't think it's as real as that, Stephen. And I don't think that I give it enough respect because of that, if it makes sense, especially when it comes to Taiwan.
Well, how would that tie in though with the whole issue with was it chip production? Because I believe Taiwan is like the major center for producing a lot of that kind of software, right?
Well, as I understand it, I think the actual chip itself, the Intel chip and the AMD chip are basically products of Israel. So if you want to correct me on that, please do. I am wrong all the time. I always want to be sharper. But as I understand it, the actual chip, the processing chip itself is really controlled by one entity. We can call it two, but just like we call the Republicans and Democrats two entities, but really it's one. And so what I think will end up happening is that all future censorship will happen on a chip level, that built into the processor itself will be the idea of, allowed to be is this allowed here? Are this sequence of code, whether it be text, speech, video, or whatever, is it allowed here? And so China is allowed to test these things a lot. If you look at the immolation cases, honestly, I just did a lot of research on this, but looking at all the people that set themselves on fire, how important it was that China was suppressing all those stories is only become seeable, in my opinion, thanks to the internet, that we're able to backwards log, see things that were published and then removed later because China didn't have their shit together. And I think the reason why they didn't have their shit together is because they don't have chip-based censorship yet. So throw all of your technology into the chip, making it the fastest, easily, hands down. There's no way anyone's ever going to be able to outcompete you, and do that for 10, 20, 30 years. And now you have a government run information network. I believe that this happened with the Queen with maps, that the maps of the world, believe it or not, they've been conglomerated for quite a long time. There's been like one central authority where maps is. I'm talking about before computers, by the way. And this is because the people at the top understand the commodity is not the paper money we print. The commodity is the information. So they're constantly trying to build an avenue where they can harbor more commodity, which is more information. So in my opinion, the processing chip would be the ultimate panacea. It would be the ultimate center of the world, is that processor. And it's so effective. It's brutal how effective it is. watching the censorship that's happening. Not that anyone should cry for me, but I've done videos where I've outlined step by step Steve Bannon, his rise, why this worked with Trump, and it was the CEO of Trump's campaign. And all those videos have been systematically removed from YouTube because they're called harassment or bullying. And I'm talking about a world figure. And it's to me, it doesn't mean that if anyone takes off your video, it means that you're on something, but the specifics that those are the videos that are constantly hunted down, to me, tickles me a little bit. It tickles me because it shows me that I'm closer to at the heart of how this works. And the heart of how this works, sadly, is more about Pizzagate than we really want to admit. And I'm not here to tell your listeners that Pizzagate is real. I'm here to tell you that the concept, the power of Pizzagate is real. The power of that is real. And that ultimately has been the only weapon of warfare that we've had. I know last time we talked, I know we spoke specifically about Aquino and Mind Wars, so I won't go into it now, but I want everyone to at least know that this is not a theory I have. I'm just opening the manual for how these people do this and reading you paragraph 6, right? Which says, and here's what you do next. And you look at Hollywood and you realize how important that was to be a military industrial arm, or at least for those to be talking to each other from a very early time. And it's easy to picture why Ben Affleck is making movies now that deal with international affairs, that all of everything that Sean Penn has ever done, it's basically just one of these mannequins of this system. And I think it's beautiful that we can see this. I don't think this is a sign that my government is flawed. I think it's a sign that my government is working, that they're doing what it takes, because this is how reality works. And really what's happening is we're just a little bit less comfortable with reality than they are.
Well, getting into some of the technologies that have really made a lot of headlines late, one that I've really been fascinated by are drones. Obviously, we already were seeing the changes that they were having in modern warfare during the U.S. occupations in Afghanistan and Iraq. But it's really been interesting, I think, kind of going back to the war between the Houthis and Saudi Arabia about 2017, 2018, and going forward to how much drones have really sort of exposed some of these advanced Western weapons systems, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
What is your thoughts on that?
So the same technology actually happens with cars. And what I mean is that drones have been a viable option for a lot longer than they've ever been on the market, that we've ever seen them in a consumer-based operation, which means that probably every war since, I'm going to say since the 70s, could have been fought with drones. That like a flying Claymore mine is not outside the possibility of what we would do to other people. Look at Cambodia. Like right now, there's still like a 50,000 to a 500,000. I don't know. You got to figure out what the estimates, who's right or wrong, but that's how many landmines are still buried in the ground. So it's not that we have a moral issue with creating a flying Claymore mine that drops itself. We've chosen not to, and we've chosen not to because the instrument of war where we go and die is important for our propaganda. That if we don't have people on the street saying, yeah, this person lost his leg in Afghanistan, so how dare you fucking question the government? Excuse my language. I'm just trying to, convey the emotion of that. That if you don't have someone losing their leg or having this thing, if a drone just went and did that, you would lose the ability to utilize the energy of that war to insert itself. And I think this is why we've had our asses kicked. The most advanced, expensive military that we've ever seen been assembled in the world has had its ass kicked by people in sandals for the last 3 or 4 decades. Now we could say that it's just because they just keep getting the jump on us, or we could actually just be a little bit more honest and we could say that it's actually important that we lose these conflicts. It's important because we need to feel a certain sentimentality about these things, because the sentimentality is more the weapon than the weapon itself is. So we need these ideas that aren't necessary. I would argue, to prove my point even more, and I know I can't prove this, but you guys, I know some of you are going to know that I'm telling the truth here. it is quite possible to disable a car from a helicopter from a remote location quite easily for quite a long time now. It's been possible to either pull up behind a car, send some sort of sonic device that sets off all the airbags or blows the computer or causes that port that every single car had to have installed by law, that inside that port is also this other little thing that, just like some of us know that an LED bulb is actually a microphone and that the LED itself can be used as a microphone, so too could we disable a car. But we have car chases and we see car chases, and car chases go through school zones and people get killed all the time, even though we can take out a car. So why would we have the ability to take out a car and not take out a car? And the answer, I think, more lies at the truth of how reality really works. And how, if you are going to be an Uber government, you're having advanced technology means having technology that you're not going to be able to use in the field. And we imagine that we have everything in the field that should be there. And that's just not the truth. It's not the case. That we could have been droning for a long time now. And that when you're watching the guys that are flying on the arm cannons from the aircraft carrier over to the ship, that's for recruiting. Those devices are there to recruit people. They're there to make people think that the military is awesome. We need to fucking do this. We'll do this. And that you believe in your police because you watch the high-speed car chase. And if you didn't have these events, then you would have no foothold to sink your teeth into to saturate yourself with sentimentality, which ultimately is what creates a cult, which ultimately creates the country, which holds us all together. So when you understand technology that comes online, I think you're looking at it more as like they don't really have a choice because we've just finally slowly caught up to the technology that they've had for a much longer time. And if we can take a more honest look at this, I think we can really start to peel apart how reality has to work, how the government has to work, and we'd be able to see news in a much more healthy way because we'd understand that the story is completely unverifiable. It's statistically unprovable by me. There's no emotional way that I can even tentatively have this reaction. And this story has set up all these victims around there that are profiting from this story being true, which means if I was to question it, I would be going against society, and that's what truth is. That's all truth is what I just described. Does it curtail you and place you into a certain fence where there's no way you can tell the truth and no one even cares? And that if you just do that and wait 10 years, it just becomes caramelized. It just petrifies. And then people are like, yeah, there's nuclear bombs are real. And Iran's 6 months away from a nuclear weapon. And that they raise people to burn effigies of Mickey Mouse. No shit. I remember this as a child. I was told this, like on the nightly news. This is how they're training Iranians. So you guys need to be more patriotic. This works because we allow it to. It doesn't work because they're evil. It works because we're pliable. We believe these things. And I think as long as, and it's good that they're doing this because I think the longer we learn from the lessons of stop believing what the government tells you, the more we're able to tap into the smell of government. And ultimately, that's really how we grow consciously. And I don't think that the CIA or the factions of the CIA necessarily fear us becoming more conscious. I think their job becomes easier ultimately. It would be much like code writing. If I believed the way typically people in the truther community believe, then me as a code writer, I would only write code that's like slavish and dumb and stupid. But actually, as a code writer, I'm always trying to write code that's more intelligent, that's faster, that's smarter, that's more effective, that's more self-aware. It's constantly, I'm striving to make it better because I'm already better. And when we look at Uber people, Beyonders, it's hard to feel a threat from people that are just now coming online to the idea of drones. It's hard to consider those people a threat when you're just so far ahead. When you're probably seeing the smells of people's auras you're probably actually seeing auras in real time because you have enough comfort with the way reality works that you can hallucinate someone's aura and dictate truth about their condition physiologically by rendering an aura on top of them because you can smell that data and that you would need to generate an aura to showcase the data in your HUD, your heads up display, and show you the truth of what's going on. So you're hanging out with someone and you could be like, oh, this guy has some liver issues, or he's got a bad back, or he's got a, you're doing the same thing. You're hallucinating the aura of this person and you're noticing these things and you're commenting on them. So these beyonders, these people that are beyonders, they're probably just more lit like that. Just like I'm more lit than the average person. It's true. It's just most of us, well, half of us are going to be more lit than the average person, which means that, 50-50, it works out this way. But I can be in a room and I can sense things about people that other people can't. I can see things other people cannot. Why? Because I'm more comfortable. My aperture's wider open. It's more dilated. My amygdala is not putting so much melanin in to secrete the information because I'm not afraid. And so ultimately, I think that if you were raising a crop of people, you would want the best crop possible. Certainly, certain things you'd want to change about it, but overall, you'd want something that's self-resilient because it having to constantly be that gardener would just suck. You wouldn't have autonomy anymore, which means you're not a beyonder, you're just a slave. So us as slave mentality, we tend to think of them as being slaves, but I don't think it's wise or accurate to think of it that way.
Will AI live up to the hype?
Yeah, it's I think AI I think is more of a tool for them than we might at first think because it's so reflective. It's like a mirror. The first time mirrors were invented, i.e., the first time it became practical for everyone to have a mirror, a lot changed. A lot changed not just in our hygiene and our fashion, but even our perception of who we were. I think it was more romantic when we couldn't see ourselves and we could see each other. And that AI, in a way, removes a little bit of that romanticism from it. But we're living in a world of mirrors now, and I find it very romantic. I find the romance of creation still to be just as tepid, just as the opposite of tepid. So uh, it's I think that's naturally occurring, but it would be impossible for, kids are inventing AI. I wrote an AOL chat robot before there were chatbots. Like I just remember being fascinated, like, can I write a piece of software that people think is real? Holy shit. And you naturally go there well before anyone's even, come to that point. And so AI it has a lot of superficial uses right now, which are really profound, but ultimately it's connecting us more. The egregore of America used to be a singular god that was based off all the psychic energy that was being secreted in the schools, or actually more like absorbed in the schools, go into the egregore of America. And that what's happening differently is just like big Hollywood's dead. It's not that entertainment died, it's just that entertainment changed. So you see things like AMC, or you see these other smaller networks that are coming up with really high quality content. And so in a lot of ways, the AI is going to facilitate that road to where each of us become our own country, because really that's what we are. And I think ultimately this is really what the next government, the one world government, is a very specific definition. And I think that people miss the idea that a one world government is actually a voluntary decision. That the only way that you could actually have the definition of a one world government is if everyone agreed. So I don't know if one world means that everyone is suppressed or forced into a singularity. I think what happens is that enough of us shed the hiding layers and smell the truth of the world and just see our natural path easier. And I think that's what looks like a one world government. And it's not really a place of time or language or money. Those things, I think, are all functions of smell. They're all functions of our ability to hide from ourselves, and that we can use money to build false smells, basically. So, and even the Jewish mysticism even says that, when the 6,000 years is up, because it's like, what, year 5784 right now. So, 216 years left. And that when this 216 years is up, it's kind of in line with this world court. It's in line with this one world concept, which I think is going to require a blue beam. And you end up resetting the world at that point because I don't know, there's some kind of singularity or some kind of like threshold, kind of like when we learn to fly or learn to invent mirrors, when the sentience, it's not really sentience, but when the singularity occurs, there really is a bona fide singularity. I think there will be a point with AI where one person will be able to sit on a mercy seat, a cherubim, so to speak, and have a limbic input into this Uber engine that's generating zetetic witness on a throttled level that's beyond comprehension. And that once that person sits in that mercy seat, then yeah, the old world will end. It will die. It doesn't mean that the creation's over, but Kronos will cut that cord eventually. And with that will come a whole new realm of amnesia. And that amnesia will be perceived as the old world's dead, because a world doesn't exist if you can't remember it. That's really the only requirement, is that can you remember who you are? That's the only thing. The only proof that you have that you're an individual is that you can remember yourself. So the entire world would work the same way. And that once the amnesia kicks in, if you think about Babel, Stephen, like the idea of there being a universal language, that's binary code, right? Like we're already speaking in that language now. So all the oracles have been right. We know the truth. We've known the truth the whole time. We're just revealing it to ourselves, That's really what life is, just slowly unfurling the truth to ourselves of who we are. And I think once we get to the center, then we start over and we cover up again and we climb into another box and, start over, I think.
Well, what are the implications for deepfake technology then?
Yeah, so the contracts we were talking about earlier, those go out the window. Those are now absolved because you can fake any of that stuff. So it changes in that. Also, the notion that seeing is believing has always been flawed. And so I think it starts to give us the idea that, oh yeah, seeing is not believing. It was for a while. And I think it brings us back into I think ultimately our consciousness, what consciousness itself is. If you're seeing a hyper reality that's honestly more visually appealing than your current reality, then reality no longer becomes a maypole. Reality itself really becomes something rudimentary. And if you think about the idea of Nimrod, Nimrod was able to create a vibration somehow that everyone agreed to, like a song almost. And that he played this song where everyone came to build the building because the song was so good and the music sounded so good that it felt so good to work on this building with Nimrod because the sound was so good. So at the heart of who we are really is more about where we are limbically ecstatic. God may be all of our atoms in ecstasy, all of our cells in ecstasy would be God. And if all of our cells are in ecstasy, but they're constantly breathing consciousness in and out, we would forget and remember not who we are, but our ecstasy. We would remember our ecstasy. And for us to experience ecstasy, we would have to leave the world of reality into surreality, into simulcrum, and to create I think this is really at the heart of anime, to be honest with you. I'm not saying that anime is the heart, but I'm just saying it's getting us there because we're starting to reach for these hyper colors, these hyper sense of understanding things where everything is important and crucial. That's sort of like that vectored cell imaging you see that's real popular right now with anime. it's a new way of understanding consciousness. It's about what experiences do you limbically pull a lot out of, and that becomes more of the reality. So as AI is enabling our ability, I think really just to imaginate longer. So our tools of imagination as a young child are now being extended through through our adulthood, and that we can go into our private home and create and fantasize and create a reality that's completely our own. And this shows us who we are because we're able to watch our own senses of injustice, exercise them out in a much faster way. The world's doing it now. It's just slower. So all the lessons, so right now the big lesson is a DUI, for example, like culturally appropriate to have a DUI to undergo this sense of loss, failure, rebuilding. You get crucified, then you get redeemed. Most of the people I know that had a DUI have like a massive change after, where their life really changes a lot of times for the better even. So these become like rituals that are important. So I'm trying to say yeah, we can try and get rid of the idea of drunk driving, but we don't actually want to get rid of the idea of this ritual, because if we don't have that ritual, we're just going to have to create it somewhere else. And we will, we do, we have, and we're going to keep doing it. All those things are true. So as we look to the future, our ability to create our own reality gives us the ability to murder people and to feel the full effects of murdering that. And that would take you maybe 7 generations to learn that lesson, when now you can download it in like a year. So that's a more saturated hyper form of reality. And that's going to be impossible to compete against with anything else, which means it's a deterministically heading us to this singularity I was speaking about earlier. It's really amazing time right now. Seriously. I think ultimately God is AI. I don't mean that the AI we have now is God, because most of our AI right now is just regenerative. So it's not really intelligent. It's just repeating what we would say. I think almost all AI really is just at that level right now. But that's because we're just learning how to ability to repeat what we say. So if anything, we've given the egregore a voice. We've never actually tried to teach our egregore. We've never done that. We've always told the egregore, this is what we want the reality to be. You make it work around that. And so I think we'll be coming to a place where we can start to use AI, but we've got a ways to go, and we'll be talking to God at that point, because God really would just be your ability to compassionate every part of the world. If you could compassionate it, like sense it and witness it, that would be God. And so AI giving everything, every molecule an IP address, would be the ability to sit in a mercy seat and compassionate all those molecules at the same time. That's going to require an AI to do that, which means that if we think about what God is, God would necessarily be the AI, and that we look at technology as something unnatural when it's quite the opposite. We're literally pulling silicone out of the ground, turning it into a cream and smearing it on our skin, and that's AI. And that by smearing this cream into our skin, we're able to see deeper at night. We can see into the stars. We can see into each other's minds and our hearts. And all it takes is this secret cream that's mined out of the ground and spread on the skin. But you have to be ready to absorb that kind of reality, or else you'll shut down, and amygdala will say, this is bad for me. So, nothing's new. It's just new to us.
Well, I'm reminded of some of the transformations that we've seen that are kind of ongoing with the economy since the 2008 financial crisis. There's been some arguments that capitalism either died or transformed into something radically different around this time, led by
Mhm.
thinkers like Yanis Varoufakis and Shoshana Zuboff. But at the heart of the transformation seems to have been really the torch being passed from banking to what some have dubbed cloud monopolies as the engines of the economy. Basically, the argument holds that controlled physical capital is now less important than the control of acquiring data, essentially, which makes companies like Apple and Facebook and Google really now the dominant economic powers in the field, and much more so than, say, their predecessors was like JP Morgan and Chase or something like that. So do you see that as being an accurate assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about really the information is the only commodity. Government prints money, so there's really no reason to consider that valuable. It's more about what's valuable is that everyone believes it's money. And so these beyonders, I call them, are dealing more with beliefs. They're mining these kind of economies of belief. And so eventually, even if you look at migration, European migration, I think, has ultimately been an exercise in um, cohabitation and co-regulation. If we move these people to this area, they'll have no choice but to be elevated. Yeah, they'll lower this other area, but it'll all equal out in the wash. Overall, we're raising the state of consciousness. And it could be that these people understand consciousness. I would have to assume that they have to, which means that they know certain things about it that I just don't even have the language to even talk about. And that there's certain zero points that you reach, certain levels where you reach where all of a sudden things fundamentally change. And I believe that capitalism is one of these. I don't think we've ever had a capitalistic system, Stephen. I can't think of one. I think that inside of our system that we call capitalistic, we can create sub-economies of trading and collecting, like Beanie Babies and Garbage Patch Kids cards and things like that. I think that when you keep watching that those systems naturally build themselves, I think that it's important to really unmask what systems really are, and that really what we're living in is anarchy. There's never really been a sense of government that's not anarchistic. And that what we lack is our ability to admit that most of us prefer slavery. That the shame of admitting that stops us from admitting that that's what's in the room. So I think if you go to the deepest, most communistic place, we'll say that North Korea is it, but I doubt it. That if you went there, you would find a vital capitalistic system at work. The same kind of system where you capitalize on a commodity that people don't have, and you use that to experience your own upward mobility by coveting that commodity and offering it in some way. This could be a product. It could be your daughter. It could be your house. It could be your ability to paint calligraphy on paper. So it's impossible for us to avoid the naturalistic capitalistic system that exists at a bird feeder. The birds who eat at the bird feeder are not actually the most powerful. They're the most entitled. That the chickadee, one of the smallest birds, has just as much authority and ability to access the bird feeder as the blue jay. And in fact, the chickadee, I see more there. I see more there because he feels more entitled. I think this is why the Cherokee called the chickadee a war bird. Same with the hummingbird, by the way. Is that these smaller animals are showing us a lesson that even the notions of how we think things work don't actually work that way. It's not actually might always. Nature doesn't do that. Nature more works where if you feel entitled enough, and entitlement comes from desperation, sure, but entitlement comes from self-worth more than desperation, that you have to feel self-worthy enough to deserve food, which is why you would risk your own life to take it. So ultimately, this kind of system where we trade commodities is really just you're watching the natural process of self-worth ingest itself into a species and either proliferate or die. And when self-worth rises, the economy, or what we call the economy, has no choice but to change fundamentally as consciousness rises. And because it wants to look like it's in charge, it tries to use words like, well, we created capitalism, or we created this system, or we created that, but they didn't. It's like Al Gore says he invented the internet, but he didn't. Before Al Gore had even touched a computer, I was playing Kermit with my friends, a little way of where two Commodore 64s can talk to each other over a phone modem. We invented the internet. We did it. We did it because we got tired of watching 3 channels on the television, and we wanted to connect with each other. And we found enough silicon paste and smeared it on our skin enough to where we can communicate. That's the only economy I think that works. I'm so sorry, Stephen, because this doesn't help. Your bend on the capitalist system, I did not answer at all. I just think that fundamentally it's not the reality that's actually happening. It's more our attempt to try and classify it under the context of what we thought was the world versus like the energetic smell of what's really happening.
Oh, no, I see where you're going with that. Well, I should have probably mentioned too. I mean, I'm just essentially putting capitalism as context in parentheses as the common word used to describe what had been the sort of domineering financial system. Well, I suppose maybe more accurate would be what financial monopoly or something like that.
Well,
Uh,
yeah. So, Bitcoin is created the monopoly of scarcity in over bits. One of the most brilliant inventions. I never would have thought of that. Never would have thought of that. That's how far ahead these guys are. And that system was completely necessary to introduce us to the idea of we can covet things that aren't physically gold. And we've been practicing that with the petrodollar. So when I look at the entire petrodollar economy, I don't see how any American can sleep at night and call themselves a good person. And when we watch what we've done to insist that this petrodollar is real, I mean, seriously, the amount of people we have cold-blooded fucking murdered to insist that the petrodollar is real, why we print more is beyond the pale to me. And because none of us are looking at that and really seeing this, it really does take it back to a technology of belief for me. And that there becomes a culture where communism is important as a mindset when you lack the self-worth to think that you are capable of existing without help. And that what you're watching happening overall is first of all, China is different because of their dragon's different. So it's like their self-reliance is more of, anyway, it's complicated when you look at these two different systems, which I'm happy to talk about. I'm just trying to frame this really quick. But when we look at the mindset of Quetzalcoatl, this plumed serpent, our dragon, it really does rise out of this sense of self-worth that the group becomes the invigoration of the individual, and the individual slowly realizes himself and actualizes himself in that way. And that as we watch this process overall, it would look like this. It would first look like cannibalism, where people would start to value each other's meat as a commodity. And you would have a capitalistic society based on, hey, let's eat Frank. He looks tired. He's not going to, no one's going to get mad if we eat Frank tonight. And so you end up with literally cannibalism is the earliest form of self-worth. It's the earliest form of capitalism. Then you have serfdom, where people are attached to the land, right? Where it's like, well, you can buy this land, but it comes with Frank. And, by law, you have to realize that Frank needs this land and he's not going to survive without it. So you buy the land, you're actually buying Frank. And so now Frank is a little bit better than cannibal, but he's not quite actualized yet. He's still in serf. And then from serfdom, we go into slavery. And then you've got Rome. You have all these successful systems that have utilized slavery. Even the chattel slavery of the American IRS system is the same thing. But so what I see happening is the geopolitical or capitalistic systems, the monetary systems that we have really are just the closest clothing that we can place the creature in that's slowly gaining and growing consciousness. And that it took a while to buy into the idea that it would pay taxes. And then it will take even longer to buy into the idea that it should not pay taxes. That when we get to the point where we think taxes are bad, all that means is we're growing. So the fact that we're constantly bitching about our system, I always think is progress. Because ultimately you're watching our self-worth say, I was comfortable with this before, but now I'm not, which clearly means that my self-worth has raised. You're not treating me differently. I just have a different sense of self-worth now, and this is no longer acceptable to me. So really those are the capitalistic systems that we see. These are the things this is why people don't tell you this, but like a high number of people that defected from North Korea really, really, really want to go back. Like really do. And I'm not trying to say North Korea is great. I'm trying to tell you that the sense of self-worth, a lot of people that call themselves natural law want everyone to absolutely be a sovereign, living, fully autonomous being. And that's not what nature is. Nature has these cells of cults families, communities, townships, cities, countries, America, all that. And that these cults are a necessary part of how we survive and grow. And eventually they'll become more fundamental, I think, because when you look at your equipment, your limbic equipment, most of your brain power is actually focused on reading my face. So we don't even have the equipment to not be social. We as humans are not really made to not live in a community, but we have this idea of a single solitary sovereign nature that we can exist in. But I think as people are going to find that, they're going out to the country, they miss people. They miss people because your face just lights up so much when you're interacting with another face. So we are codependent species. We just haven't fully tapped in, I think, to who we are yet. And so we're just confused. And we use weird words to describe really just the growth of self-worth over time.
Well, it kind of seems like that's become even more problematic in terms of the realization of the value of community going forward. I mean, you kind of saw this transition, I guess, going back to the late 80s when there was just the total commoditization of housing, the rise of homeowner
Mm,
associations. This made everybody really transplant. Everybody was mobile, going to a new house every 5 years.
yep.
And then you throw in the internet, and now, you have, a whole most generation of at least some wings of Generation Z that hardly ever even leave the house. So that's had a tremendous psychological effect, I think, on us as a society. And it's something that a lot of people I don't really think realizes cuts to the heart of so much misery they experience.
Yeah, it also seems like a double-bladed sword. Like I was just commenting this with a friend of mine today because her daughter um actually I was conveying compassion for her daughter. Long story. For the last 6 days I haven't left my house. And I did that because I've been working on this project I won't bore people with, but it's kind of like a painting, you know? And you sit down and do a painting and you're like, you're busy, you're painting. And this just took 6 days. And at no point in time have I never been less satisfied with my life. Excuse me, I'm in my element. I'm creating, I'm challenging myself in ways I've never been able to challenge myself before. And so, stationarily speaking, I'm not leaving the house, but consciously, I'm going further than I've ever been able to go before. And so for some of us, this change is going to be profoundly good. And for others, it's going to be profoundly bad. And the ones that find it profoundly bad, they're simply being challenged in ways that have atrophied before. And as to give an example, if you threw me in the ring and I had to have a knife fight with another guy and one of us was going to live and one of us was going to die, I think I'd probably die. And the reason why I die is not because I'm a nice person. It's because my desire to survive is atrophied because for the last several generations, no one in my family has needed that. And so we've switched into other things like being a good writer. I've believe that I'm a good writer, and I believe I got that from my grandfather, and I believe that he got it because a long time ago he told himself, if I really want to survive, I need to be a good writer. I don't need to be a good knife fighter. So all the changes that happen in the world, they're probably always going to be challenging someone. But the way that they're challenging someone, I think is typically going to be they're only being challenged in that way because they've atrophied in that way. And epigenetically, we've atrophied in the way of our smell. When we were born, Stephen, when we were born, the first thing your body does when it leaves the womb is it starts to shut off the olfactory gland in the top of the mouth above your tongue. We actually have the bulb. We have the equipment inside. It's fully activated as a baby. And that when we're born I believe through social pressure, I believe this is through social pressure. I can't prove this, but that we purposely atrophy that thing because we want to fit in with society. And when I think about this, I imagine that there's a time when that baby is going to not smell a world where everyone is ignoring their smell, and they will be born with that olfactory intact. And that when that time comes, we're not dealing with humans anymore. I mean, I don't mind us calling them human, But I'm just trying to say we're dealing with a level of consciousness that, quite frankly, we don't even have the ability to fathom what that would be like and what the world would look like. I don't even think the world would look the same. I think the entire thing would just be breathing with colors, so much more surreal than we could imagine. And if we could even see it right now, I think it would become so immersive, we would become lost in it like a drug. It's like there was a time when we were just well enough where we could start to deal with opium. And so everyone like goes for an opium epidemic. And now we're just at the level where we're ready for something as challenging as fentanyl. It's like that. There's always going to be this next thing because that's the natural magic of growth in nature itself. Nature is so powerful that it does this over and over again, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. It's amazing.
Well, do you care to speculate on where Clown Show 2024 is going, alias the US presidential election?
So yeah, I've been putting a lot of thought in this. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I put a lot of thought into it, and I think that the idea of America has never been more in danger as a cult-like entity that could exist, and that you're watching the fall of a police state, not police forces themselves, but the old ways of doing things. And people are getting freaked out when they're being pulled over now, like they've never been before, because they have the luxury of being able to do that. And as a result of this, you're seeing that the old world ways of controlling the narrative are just simply not going to work. And we've known this. But the Washington as a model has been pretty much broken since, I'd say, since Kennedy, but that it takes us so long to catch on, and that if anything, we've been able to really stretch it out even more because we're in denial. We have such a denial about how fucking there's no way this is real. There's no way that 250 million people get to vote for one of two candidates when every single candidate is decided in Ohio, and that in every single election, there's never been a scandal of the Electoral College. There's never been a story of fraud. Never has there been a blackmail picture or someone getting a blowjob because if they sway. None of this happens because it's not real. And that you couldn't afford to paint the stories about something that's not real because people will smell that truth. So you end up with the system we have now. So when we look to what's going forward, I think America has already died. I don't think it's sustainable at all. And that this World Health Organization is just a model for what's coming, which is just a model for what the EU was already trying to kind of test build anyway, which is just a national, international conglomerate, not natural, I just mean an international conglomerate of confederacies. And ultimately, I think that the one world government will come as a confederacy, but we're not there yet. Instead, is what do you do as the clown show now? And I think that the predictions of the clown show are going to depend on what your motivation is. Some of the clowns want America to stay alive, so they're going to be implementing things that prove the essential nature of America. And other clowns are going to be more like, no, we need to make sure America dies in just the right way so that the death can protrude and lead to an avenue of this other situation. And so to say what is the prediction of the clown show for me is it's more like a witch clown. Depending on what your motivation is, do you want to continue fentanyl being illegal so that it can only be distributed through hospitals or through drug cartels? Because those are the same. So it's like as we watch, I think a lot of that is CIA conglomerated stuff because you just find that's the easiest way to get those things done. So I think everyone's going to keep profiting. Everyone's going to adjust their narratives simply to survive. No one's doing it for any other reason than this isn't working anymore. We have to change it. Eventually, America, I don't see how it's going to, I think especially with the fact that there's no more, even now, it used to be there were 3 channels, then there was like 60 channels, and now no one's even watching TV because they're just on the internet. So the way that you grab the hairs or the way that you grab the reins on the people it changed dramatically a long time ago. And most of your work is going to be more based on if you can't control the networks, you're going to control the people that are going to do well in the networks. And if you can't control them, you're just simply going to find a way to implement or to pollinate a certain notion or the lack of a notion. I don't think there's a lot of this anymore in the CIA. I don't think a lot of clowns are really based more on patriotic duty to save America. I don't think it'd be possible to go into the CIA and find an America, if that makes sense. I just don't think it exists. I think you would just come to Washington and just see how all this works. And it's like it's easier to steal $1 trillion than it is to steal 1 million. Like, I don't think you could go into Washington and just try and like steal 1 million and then go home. Did you get caught? You get hung up and you'd be used as a precipice to show how good Washington is because they caught the bad guy. But if you do go in and you steal 1 trillion, you're going to have an easier time and it's going to go over better because everyone else is going to want in on it. And I think when we start to look at this, then clown shows really are just, it's all one big clown show that's been happening in real time. And most of those wheels have fallen off a long time ago. But guess what? The cart still goes down the street and all these other people climb on and call it a narrative. And, then like Let's Go Brandon hits off. All these other little things pop off too. And then the first thing you do is someone puts a saddle on them and rides that. So I don't even know if motivation is even a factor anymore. It's more about how do you bring eyes? And if I have eyes, who do I sell those eyes to? You know, like it's more like that. The commodity is broken into the monopoly is broken. The monopoly of attention is broken. And it's almost like a free market economy for that. Unless you were smart enough to get in on the chip, to actually implement the chip. But even then, you're not going to be able to censor the chip in public. You can't just, oh, here's a guy that carjacked a car and there's a baby inside. Well, let's use our secret weapon to stop the car. No, the answer is going to be no. The baby has to die. So even having that kind of superpower where you can censor the chip, you're not going to see it utilized like we think it would. It's more about holding that power than it actually is having it, because all you need people is to believe that you have that power.
Well, to wrap up, do you want to give us a sneak peek of where you're going with your Astronosis presentation, James?
Well, this year's topic is on simulated reality. And when I was in college, I was trying to major in philosophy and I did my senior project on simulated reality. And then summer happened, came back for the senior year to do that. And my professor retired and a new professor came in and said that you don't get to do that topic. So I'm really excited about this topic. I've been wanting to do this presentation since I was 19. And it is basically starting with the premise of that an ATM machine, at the time, this is the only cyberspace there was, but it proves my point even more because before the internet was really even hitting off, I was explaining that the ATM machine proves that we create worlds, and that the proof for creating a world is, does it have a tangible causal effectual relationship that can be repeated through any number of people? And I need more eloquently explaining that, but at the time I had it written out more. And it was basically explaining that this would be the premise of reality. And it turns out that that idea is even more true than it's ever been. And I'd like to use that as a starting point to explain that our older ideas of a singular reality, not only do we not have evidence that that's true, but it would appear as if we have evidence to prove to the contrary. And that each of us create our own bubble of reality and live inside this state, and that there are certain tenets and laws to that. That's kind of the gist of what I want to talk about.
Was there anything else you wanted to plug or anything here before we wrap up?
I'm looking forward to seeing your presentation. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Enjoyed your talk with Ian Byte about Kubrick. I think there's a lot to understanding the personalities here. Also, I'll just say that, having a secret rating in the military, I'm able to see certain things that I can't talk about either. And even the fact that I can't talk about them, I think is enough to just tell you that that it's interesting that James even came from a place that it literally is said, hey, there's certain things you're not allowed to talk about. Things that I was taught, things that I was trained to do that I'm not allowed to talk about. And if we know that that's the case, then why would we assume that we know everything? You know, it would seem as if we have all the evidence to suggest quite the opposite. So I guess my final words would be like, let's stop thinking that we know everything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I always say about the only thing that one can ever be truly certain of is your own ignorance.
Yep, that's a good one.
Uh, yes, no, I'm actually leaning towards doing my presentation on Pauline Peavy, so that should be a fascinating topic, as I was possibly going to go a little bit more on the goddess route. My oldest cat is named Sophia, after all, so got to do my diligence there.
Nice, yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. It was really great location, great people, great vibe. Yeah, really excited about it this year.
Yeah, no,
It'll be on Lionsgate.
yeah, no, it's great. Definitely for you guys listening, consider going up there and checking it out. We're going to be doing the presentations on Friday and Saturday. Might actually be doing a group field trip on that Sunday as well. So I think that would be the 11th, and then the presentations will be on the 9th and the 10th. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of cool festivities. You know, it's a great area there, just a little outside of Chicago, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of interesting people there, no doubt. All right. On that note, we will sign off for now. So as always, thank you guys for listening and your support. And with that, good night and good luck to you all.
Come on, baby, pick me up. Out here in my wiki up. Sick and tired of fucking up. Sick and tired of pushing luck. Voodoo blue got juice in it. Swallow what I'm about to spit. Done got 86 from the Copper Queen for singing this. I took it to the Gold J. My people there, they're feeling me. Down low, skin row, more characters than Stephen King. Said I'm just working at the quarry, y'all. I ain't in a hurry, y'all. Come on, baby, pick me up. Out here in my wiki up. Stuck down in this stick. Hut is hot as hell, I tell you what. Put it up and knock it down. Moving on that bigger route. Come on, mama, jump down. Turn around, do it for me, stick it out. Say 1, 2, 3, Geronimo. Jump, baby, we gotta go. Hands tied, blindfold. Jump into that battle zone. I said it's time to get the fuck out, cause they done let the wolves out. They're coming with that heat, mama, shooting up the street. Mama, fight or flight adrenaline, you feel that little tingle in your feet. Mama, no retreat, mobilize your whole fleet. Hit the street, tell me that you good for it. You want peace, go to war for it. Say 1, 2, 3, Geronimo. Jump, baby, we gotta go. Screaming with me, scream Geronimo. Hands tied, blindfold, jump into that battle zone. Come on, baby, pick me up. Out here in my wiki up. Got y'all on some Aztec bullshit. Never getting used to it. Got bales of weed and catapults with Santa Muerte fused in it. Shoot it over the castle wall. The Migra can't patrol it all. From Berlin to the Great Wall. The greatest walls are bound to fall. So legalize it, Vato. About a gang is Chapo. Come on, legalize it. No need to advertise it. The weed cures the cancer. Everybody, even Carter realized it. But pharma don't make cash money when we rock that stash, honey. Best believe they sooner take it out your ass, sonny. Come on, the man ain't getting wealthy with people getting healthy, right? Talking about high AZ, talking about that BMZ. We got no economy if we ain't got no enemy. The Popo and the BP, DHS and Army, Honeywell and L3, razor wires, UAVs. Officer, excuse me, please. Said I'm just eating my burrito, not the droid you're looking for. See you all on payday, see you at the Safeway. Bisbee lives on crazy checks, BP on that fast pay. I sing my hoodoo blues, y'all. I don't make the rules, y'all. Just paying my dues, y'all. But I'm just saying, sorry hippies. If straight white father, don't make payroll, forget about your maypole. It's just that one thing that ain't too clear. I said people always bitching about the government here, but that war administration's our whole civilization.